Our top focus at this hour, the unrest in Sri Lanka. Hundreds of protesters tried to storm the house of the Sri Lankan president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, in the capital. The protests are over the government's handling of the worst economic crisis. There is now a growing call for the president's resignation. Protesters were broken up by the police using tear gas and water cannons. Protesters dismantled a wall and hurled bricks at the police before setting a bus alight on a road leading to Gotabaya's residence. Security forces fired into the crowds and at least one man was critically wounded. After the protests turned violent, the police fired tear gas and water cannons at the demonstrators. In the wake of the violence, the capital was placed under indefinite curfew, which now stands lifted. Our correspondent was there last night when the events unfolded. Now, apart from the army bus, one police bus, one jeep, a three-wheeler and two traffic motorbikes were set on fire. 5 police officers, including an ASP, were injured during the violence. The police identified several persons from an extremist group who created the unruly situation. At least 45 people from the group of protesters has now been arrested. President Rajapaksa's office released a statement identifying organized extremist groups behind these protests. The statement said, and I quote, "The mob armed with iron clubs, sickles and clubs had provoked the protesters and marched towards the president's residence, causing a riot. Many of those involved in the violence have now been arrested and have been identified as organized extremists. They have spearheaded the protests calling for an Arab Spring in Sri Lanka. Detainees have revealed that the riot was carried out using social media anonymously to provoke and destabilize the country."
The citizen-led protest which took place opposite President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's house last evening has surely gathered momentum and buzz with the citizens here in the country, as many other protests were observed from various parts of the island, with several other protests scheduled to be held in the evening hours in Colombo and its suburbs. That's not all. A massive citizenship-led rally is set to take place on the 3rd of April, and security officials have so far guaranteed that they have no intention to impose curfew in a manner in which to prevent or deter these protesters from carrying out their fundamental right to voice their anger and frustration against the present government for leading this country into its worst economic crisis in the country's history. Reporting for WION World is one from Colombo. I'm Dasuni.
Staying with the story, after witnessing a violent night of protests over the financial crisis, streets in the Sri Lankan capital were quiet on Friday morning. While the anti-Rajapaksa sentiment is now gaining momentum, Buddhist monks of Sri Lanka are seen mediating in an effort to find solutions to the deepening crisis. The Catholic bishops of Sri Lanka have raised their voice and urged political leaders to unite to save the country. A delegation of Buddhist monks visited President Rajapaksa earlier today. The visit holds significance as monks are a majority in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan monks are supporters of the Rajapaksa brothers in power. The visit could also imply that the going is now getting tougher for the president amid the economic crisis. In the face of this economic crisis, last month, the chief prelates from the Asgiri and Malvathu presented a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The letter called to formulate a national policy to provide relief to the people affected by the economic crisis. The chief prelates also proposed development projects to alleviate the foreign exchange crisis, lower the cost of living and create a local economic model. The letter also emphasized the importance of encouraging new investment in the country and restructuring public debt. Another senior Buddhist monk also urged temples and churches to donate part of their wealth to the government. Other monks even called on all religious leaders to donate a part of their wealth from places of worship, especially gold, to the state treasury to help the country recover from the economic crisis. Some of the bishops in Sri Lanka have warned that the island is fast becoming a failed state. Sri Lanka has huge debt obligations and dwindling foreign reserves. Across Sri Lanka, people have been queuing up for miles to buy kerosene, diesel and petrol. Military troops have been deployed to fuel stations to oversee the distribution of fuel. For the past couple of weeks, thousands of people have been protesting outside the president's office. But on Thursday night, the boiling anger spilled into outright violence. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.